Hello there, you're watching CNN News 18. I'm Maha Siddiqui. On August 16, US President Joe Biden said, and I quote him, "We went to Afghanistan almost 20 years ago with clear goals. Get those who attacked us on September 11, 2001 and make sure Al-Qaeda could not use Afghanistan as a base from which to attack us again. We did that. We severely degraded Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan." Unquote. Exactly 2 weeks later, what do we see on the ground? A close aide of Osama bin Laden, Dr. Aminul Haq, making his way to Nangarhar province in Afghanistan. It's the same province where the US carried out a revenge strike to kill what they claimed to ISKP planners. This was last week, though that claim is now being disputed on the ground. This strike was to avenge the killing of 13 US servicemen killed while the withdrawal in the dastardly attack in Kabul airport gate on Thursday. Since then, another preemptive strike was done by US to thwart a terror attack. With a growing hold of ISIS-K and the possibility of ties with Al-Qaeda as well, can US really let go even after a withdrawal? That's the question we are posing this evening on Viewpoint. But first, a report on how the violence appears to be intensifying in Kabul as the deadline for the US withdrawal nears.
As the clock winds down for all U.S. troops to withdraw from Afghanistan.
We are in a period of serious danger.
Monday morning, a U.S. official tells CNN as many as 5 rockets were fired at Kabul's airport, but shot down by a U.S. defense system. There were no reports of casualties or who was responsible. Friday and Sunday, officials say U.S. airstrikes took out 2 high-profile ISIS-K targets.
We have disrupted those attacks. They are individuals involved in the facilitation and planning and production of explosive devices, and they are part of the larger network of ISIS-K that is seeking to target both Americans at the airport and ultimately to try to represent a greater threat to our interests both in Afghanistan and beyond.
Federal officials say that includes possible threats here in the U.S.
Their current capability to threaten the homeland is not there, but that is a capability that they are seeking.
All while desperate evacuation efforts continue, closing in on the withdrawal deadline. But officials say the mission isn't over. The U.S., along with 114 countries, released a joint statement saying they expect the Taliban to allow safe travel out of Afghanistan.
August 31st is not a cliff. After August 31st, we believe that we have substantial leverage to hold the Taliban to its commitments to allow safe passage.
Joining me now on the show, Major General S.B. Asthana, Global Strategic and Defense Analyst, former DG Infantry, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, former diplomat David Lyon, journalist, author of a book coming out shortly called The Long War on Afghanistan, and Khalilullah Saifi, director of the Afghan Peace Studies Organization. Rajiv Dogra, coming first to you. Ambassador Dogra, can we be sure that Taliban and ISIS-K don't have links if the cadre is being derived from hardcore Taliban itself? All right, we seem to have lost our line there with Ambassador Dogra. Let me put that question to Major General S.B. Asthana. Sir, can anybody be sure that the links between Taliban and ISIS-K are completely severed now, considering we know that the cadre of ISIS-K, some of it is derived from Taliban itself?
I'll put it the other way around. It is very well known that these links are there and these links exist. The only thing is that as of now, acknowledging that link for Taliban is becoming uncomfortable. So therefore, they are speaking a slightly different language, which you are seeing, whatever their spokesmen are saying. Why I say that the link is there, the moment Taliban entered Kabul, they opened the jail, they released Faruqi, and they released a whole lot of other guys. As far as Taliban's assurance, now their spokesperson in various interviews, including your channel, has been saying that our soil will not be used against terror against anybody else. Now, but on ground, it is still being used. The fact is that the rockets are being fired, and the rockets are being fired in Kabul right under their nose. So it's not that the ISKP is a different, has got no links with them. The links do exist. The only thing is that initially they all had combined because of the common foe, and they wanted a common aim of getting the US out. Now it's a question of trying to get their pie out of the ruling establishment, or the way the areas of control will be distributed.
All right.
So now there is a divergence slightly, and that is why, and also now Taliban is stuck because of they have to rule the country and they don't have money.
All right. Major I'll
interrupt
you there, because I want to go across now to Khalilullah to understand a bit more about the Nangarhar province. Khalilullah, we are seeing the ISKP there, Al-Qaeda remnants there, terror groups like JEM have also found some safe haven there. Is this going to be more difficult to tackle than has been assumed by the US while leaving?
Yeah, basically now the ISKP, their bases are in Kunar province and Nangarhar, and they have an efficiency in active members in Kabul as well. They are well prepared, well organized, and well trained people. Yes, for sure, the majority of those ISKP people are separated from Haqqani network in 2014, and also more than 400 foreign fighters of ISIS were released by the Afghan government before Taliban entered to Kabul from Pulicharhi prison, India's prison in Bagram. So they are more dangerous, and if Taliban need international technological intelligence support to find them and arrest them. Otherwise, it will be more difficult for Taliban to find them and defeat them easily. And they can be a big threat, not only for Afghanistan, but for the region as well.
They are a big threat, as Khalilullah is pointing out. David, did the US use the argument then of diminished terror threats from Afghanistan just so that they could leave the country because it was a drain on them after 20 years?
There's no good news for the United States in this withdrawal, absolutely none. It's been a terrible debacle at the end. I mean, successful in the sense of taking out some 120,000 Afghans, Americans and other internationals, British citizens who wanted to leave because they felt themselves in fear of the Taliban, but certainly a failure, and part of that failure is, as you mention it, the fact that Afghanistan does harbour terrorists who certainly want to carry out international attacks. And the international community is now trying to gather together to see what levers there are. There's been a remote foreign ministers meeting of the G7 countries today. There's another meeting tomorrow on potential economic sanctions that could be levered against the Taliban. But there's very few levers available. And, you know, I do see it slightly different as your first guest in terms of the links between the Taliban and ISK. You can certainly see that the rocket attacks aimed at the airport were done in order to embarrass the Taliban. This is Islamic State's leadership showing that they can carry out these kinds of attacks in Kabul, showing that they can still attack the Americans while the Taliban are protecting them. So they're using this as a sort of recruitment drive for people in Nangarhar and other provinces in Afghanistan who want to be jihadis. So I think there is a split at the top level. Certainly at junior levels, there are more links.
Ambassador Dogra, if you can hear us now, is there some sort of competitive terror tussle that is on in Afghanistan now, or the possibility of them working together is far greater than that?
Well, I think it's a mix of both. Because if it was all unified and if it was all settled, then there would be no difficulty in government formation. That has not happened, though it's been more than 10 days, almost 2 weeks. So obviously there are some difficulties, but whether they also translate into fights inter se, I am not too sure. I think it is too soon to assume that they would be taking up guns against each other. Second, we also have to realize the fact that so far Taliban has been extremely sophisticated in its messaging to the outside world. Some of the interviews which have been given are remarkable in their subtle approach. For example, the one given to your channel this morning. It was clear, it was pointed, and it sent out messages that yes, we want to do business with India, we want to have relations with India. So it's not as if we are dealing with absolutely uninitiated, sort of known to the procedures of international behavior or administration internally.
Okay.
They have learned their lesson, and I think we should wait and watch.
All right. I'll ask all our guests to stay on with us. Jeff Zeleny, CNN's Chief National Affairs Correspondent, is now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Jeff, just one more day left for evacuation. What is the latest update, first of all?
Well, this certainly is the critical last 24 hours or so in the America's engagement in the Afghanistan war. We are being told by White House officials that some 1,200 people have been evacuated in the last 24 hours, certainly a much smaller number than in the last several days leading up to this. The reason for that is certainly the threat of more terrorist attacks possible. So the screening and the capabilities of allowing more people to come into the airport certainly have slowed. But the remaining Americans in Afghanistan, the U.S. says they're committed to getting them out. The big question is, of course, all the Afghan nationals who stood alongside the U.S. forces over the last 2 decades. How many will be left behind? And that is a number that we certainly do not have an answer for this morning.
All right, Jeff, also help us understand what's the security like around the Kabul airport at this juncture, as you all are being told in Washington, D.C., because we just heard Jake Sullivan there say that we are in a period of serious danger, and you also pointed out how that has impacted evacuation today.
Well, look, the security is extraordinarily tight. The number of forces that are still on the ground are not exactly known, and we are not saying, but the security very tight. A rocket attack overnight. The U.S. intercepted what they say was in a rocket that was being aimed at the Kabul Air Force. Or the airfield. The president was notified of that in the early hours of today. We've seen those images, of course. So the car holding the rocket launcher was struck by a missile, a U.S.-fired missile, and so certainly a tense security situation on the ground as the final hours of this long war, at least this chapter of it, come to a close.
Absolutely. Jeff, many thanks for joining us with all those details from Washington, D.C.
Sure.
David, I want to come back to you now because we were talking about the security situation and the attacks that we are still seeing. We saw one on Thursday that killed 170 people. And Jeff is pointing out how today the number of evacuations that America would have liked to do in the last 24 hours was reduced because of the security situation in Kabul. Is there now also fear that this could spill over into other territories as well, not just be limited to Afghanistan? How do you see China, the Central Asian countries and Russia reacting to this new situation emerging?
Important questions. And by the way, I understand on the ground now, as night falls in Kabul, that pretty well the last American planes are beginning to leave. They're folding right in and in and in, so that on the 31st, I expect there'll be very, very few, if any, Americans still on the ground. American warplanes circling over Kabul, a lot of people in Kabul hearing that all the time. And there was a drone attack, a US drone attack on a target in Kabul following the rocket attack. So there's still a very sort of offensive position from the part of the United States, but it is all over for them in this long war. And 20 years on from 9/11, that's a terrible defeat, really, for the United States in the region. And it can only be of advantage to China. And it can only be a significant challenge, I think, to India, although, as we've heard, the Taliban have been reaching out to India. And I think so it's difficult for India to gain many advantages from this in the short term. And I think it is, when you look at Central Asia and Afghanistan's position in it, for all of President Ghani's failings, and I worked in his office as an advisor for a year on communication, so I know the system quite well from the inside. For all of his failings, and they were clearly many, one thing that he did that was really successful was to improve relations with Central Asian republics, particularly Uzbekistan, those neighboring countries to the north, Tajikistan, etc. And he really wanted to change the geography of Afghanistan, so it's no longer a threat, but actually potentially the sort of South Asian corridor, the roundabout he called it. So I think all of that is potentially gone, and those Central Asian republics will now be looking at will they be supporting the resistance? Will Tajikistan in particular support the mainly Tajik resistance in the Panjshir Valley? If there is armed resistance in Afghanistan, what's their role going to be? And that, of course, is the biggest challenge to China, who have huge investment potential in Afghanistan. They want stability, but are they going to get stability from this relatively unstable, so far, Taliban administration? As we've heard, they still haven't formed a government.
Right, right. And Khalilullah, looking at all these aspects that David is pointing out of the interest in Afghanistan from all the regional players, do you still see the US completely breaking off any association with Afghanistan, even militarily, in this context, considering the threats remain?
As I mentioned, that ISKP is treat not only for Afghanistan and Taliban, they are treat for the regional countries and also for the whole world. So I don't think that the Americans will leave Afghanistan alone. Even they leave, but I think there will be some intelligence involvement in Afghanistan that the United States will have.
Major General Asthana wants to come, and Khalilullah, I'll come back to you. Major General Asthana, is there a point you want to make?
Yeah, firstly, they will have to continue engaging, because if you see, the aim of United States was that no terror group should become strong enough to hit their mainland. Now, the environment now is so enabling for the terrorist group to flourish that somebody will certainly become strong enough to strike their mainland, and therefore they will have to continue with their intelligence operations and with their other operations. The other thing is the muted response which so many Americans who have come on your channel have given. The issue is that firstly, it's an unplanned withdrawal. Withdrawal is a very complex operation. It's a botched up withdrawal. The fact that you have given the biometrics of your people who are there, the fact that you have given so much of equipment to Taliban, it also shows a dark side of the US-Taliban peace agreement. The dark side is that the US thought that perhaps the Ghani government is saying yes to BRI, saying yes to everything to what China is saying. So they may not be able to be in their interest. As far as their withdrawal after 20 years is concerned, nobody minds that. But the withdrawal should have been orderly. That's the only thing which perhaps could have created a better situation.
Yes, there was a lot of criticism. There was a lot of criticism. There was no proper handover as well. And the Bagram base was one of the major examples of that, where the withdrawal happened overnight in the shroud of darkness and no proper handover was given to the Afghan side. Let me bring in Ambassador Dogra as well. Ambassador Dogra, if we specifically talk about ISIS-K, help us understand if they can be a potential threat to India as well.
Well, certainly any terror group which has the potential to reach out of Afghanistan and to associate with the ISI certainly would be a threat to India, whether it is ISIS-K or it is some of the others who are known to be anti-India. For example, Jaish-e-Mohammed, because their man went recently to meet the Haqqani group and also the Taliban leadership. So there are multiple threats to India. What I would like to say is that to ward off those threats, naturally there's the military option, there's the counter-terror option, but there is also a diplomatic option, and I'll again come back to the interview your channel aired this morning. There is definitely a reaching out by the other side that, look, don't abandon us, don't rebuff us, try and reach some kind of an understanding with us. And I think that is an important message. Even if there is some kind of danger to sending our people there immediately, we can at least send a message in response saying that yes, we would like to do that once your government is formed and once you have set up your embassy in the new format. After all, the personnel here at this moment would be replaced. So we have to keep on engaging them, otherwise we will leave them to the hands of people like Pakistan, China, Turkey and so on, who are anti-Indian. So as much as terror groups are a threat to India, I think the continuing linkage between Pakistan and some of the other countries with the Taliban government could be an even greater threat.
Okay. Khalilullah, but can really the Taliban govern? Because the last regime between 96 to 2001 saw them not treating women well, not treating the minorities well. This time around, as countries look at probably engaging with the Taliban, can we expect that the claims that they are making on the face of it will be, in fact, be in sync with their actions on the ground?
During the last 1 decade, the engagement of the Afghan women, Afghan politicians in civil society and international community with the Taliban political office based in Doha, there are commitments from Taliban side regarding the women's rights, human rights, freedom of speech in media, and that they promise that they will not have a monopoly on power and they will not impose their emirate system on Afghans in Afghanistan. So we are seeing now there are some freedom in media, freedom of speech, and they are allowing women to go to school and universities. We have to wait and to see the structure of their government. Are there other political party, including in their new government? Are there some women representation in the government? And which kind of the political system they are announcing. So they have their own Supreme Council meeting in Kandahar, started yesterday, and hopefully maybe in next 2-3 days or in a week, they will announce their new political system in government. So we have to wait and see how much they are fulfilling their promises.
All right, and certainly, as most of the countries have said, that they will wait for the Taliban to show action on the ground rather than merely go by claims that they are making. But at the moment, with the security situation that has deteriorated since Thursday, with ISKP openly being able to use the chaos on the ground to carry out a carnage, there are questions on whether the Taliban can govern and whether these terror groups can have the potential to target other countries, not just in the region, but reach America as well. That is something that will be of concern to all. Many thanks to all our panelists for joining us here on the show. With that, we're taking a very quick break.